The Houston Cougars are in their seventh Final Four as a program this weekend, and history is being made and not quite talked about.
You are Locked On Cougs, your daily podcast on the Houston Cougars, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Coogs, daily podcast about your Houston Cougars. I'm your host, Houston-born teacher and coach, Parker Angels. I'm joined by Brent Cahwee of the Pawnee and Yuchi Nations, and more importantly for today's episode, I guess, particularly a co-founder of indelible.com. Brent, I want to ask, I typically start the show by getting the audience involved. They want to get in the comment section and respond. Have you ever been to San Antonio?
I am sorry to report I have never been to San Antonio.
Outside of a handful of tacos and the Riverwalk, I don't know what you're missing. I would sell the tacos to you, though. All right, today's show is brought to you by a handful of people we're going to talk about later. But I wanted to bring Brent in as a specialist in a very particular part of sports history, both present and I guess recent, and to talk about some of the kind of historical aspects of what's going on with Coach Kelvin Sampson as a member of Lumbee Nation, heading to his third Final Four. Now, I'm going to say this as a title of Sampson's. If you want to argue with me, I'm open to hearing it. He's the greatest native-born coach of all time. I mean, he's got to be, right? He's three Final Fours. Is there someone I'm missing?
No, I don't think you're off base there. I mean, like you said, he's been coming up on his third Final Four. He's led, numerous programs out of the depths of, the cellar, and he's brought them to national prominence. I mean, who does that? Just not even just native, just coaches in general,
Well, and it's something that not many people have done, period, like you mentioned. He's also done that with his own career, right? He went on and was an assistant for Popovich in San Antonio. Full circle moment, I guess you could say. Mm-hmm. He spent time with the Rockets, and the University of Houston's kind of lucky the Rockets were there in town, if I'm being really honest. And he's revitalized his own career with this. His son is, for all intents and purposes, the next head coach at Houston whenever Sampson decides to hang it up. His daughter is involved on the external communication side of things, and frankly, his wife and daughter do a lot of sequening for a lot of swag and stuff like that. They do. It's a very family affair. The Kelvin's grandkids, Kellen's kids, are always around the program, and I want to talk a little about the person behind this family business because it is so unique in that, right? You've been covering him for a lot of athletes that would qualify for Indian sports and coaches for a long time. Is there a personality trait or a quality? I've been talking about his family-oriented behavior that sticks out to you before we get into like what makes this historic.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you've done conversations, interviews, or just watched interviews or listened to Coach, everything that you see on TV is Coach in person. That's him every day. There's nothing that's different that he. Like for me, I'm smiling right now, and I'll never smile. but Coach, what you get, what you see on TV, the interviews, mid-game interviews, post-game, that's Coach every day, and that's great. I think that's what people like about him is he's genuine all the time, and he's big on family, and a lot of that is attributed to where he grew up in the Lumbee Nation. Typically, your tribal nations that we're a part of, or community oriented. We're not focused on self, but we're focused on community. And when you watch Coach's program, he's built it that way. He's built it on culture. He's built it on family. And when you go into his program, you're not his player. He's your family member. And I think that's one thing that what Houston got, they didn't know what they were getting, and you can see the fruits of that labor that they put into Coach, and it's reciprocal between the school and Coach now.
Yeah, and you mentioned like he brings people into his family in that way. His coaching staff is full of former players. Quantas White's going to go be the head coach at the University of Louisiana whenever this run ends. Hopefully, it doesn't end until after Monday, right? But that's his former player from his Final Four run at Oklahoma. Hollis Price is on his bench. You got a lot of a lot of guys, his son Kellen played for him. A lot of guys throughout the program that played for him in his Oklahoma days, coming home to roost. I would love to see Eric Gordon come back and coach whenever he hangs it up. Eric Gordon loves City of Houston, played for him in Indiana for that brief stint there. You mentioned growing up as a member of the Lumbee Nation, having an impact on him from that instance. I want to ask you about a moment where we might have seen where the grit, toughness, frankly, like intensity might come from, because his father was a basketball coach, as you mentioned. But his father was also involved, and this is just in my own internet digging, and I'm open to being corrected on things as we go here. But his father was involved apparently in what is called the Battle of Hayes Pond, in which a handful of Lumbee took on the Ku Klux Klan there in North Carolina. I don't know how much history you know, because there's, frankly and unfortunately, a lot of these conflicts all over the country. But it feels fairly significant to me that a coach that runs the most physical program, arguably in America, is like the direct descendant of like this guy that went and fought for his life. Like that feels pretty significant, right?
Right. Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a time period, you know, when his grandfather, when this particular incident in history happened, it's definitely unfortunately, a common theme in the history here in the United States. But it's a great story. I mean, it's one that I love to hear every time the Final Four comes around, and the news media are looking for, you know, hey, who's this Coach Sampson? He's Native American. Let's dig into his, and this story comes up every time he comes to the Final Four, and it gets out on social media with all of our Native American followers that I have on my platform, and it's still it's history, you know, and you know, like you said, what you read online is exactly how it happened. You know, KKK came into their Native American community to do the cowardly things that cowards do, and the members of the tribal nation didn't pick up guns, or they didn't pick up anything bad. They just grabbed what they had on them, and they ran them out of the community. And it became a huge story. It was something that was published and ran nationally at that time period. And that just goes to speak to, like you said, the toughness and gritness that he learned from his father and his community. Community driven, community support, everybody protects each other.
Because when I think of, you know, I don't know how many fist fights Coach Sampson's been in, but when I think of like the way he would approach a fight, just, hey, I'm just gonna get up and start fighting. I don't know what I got in my pockets, but like that feels so much like exactly how he'd handle it, right? Like he's not gonna go find something. No, I'm right here. I'm doing it now.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So, you know, but you know, that goes to, you know, going back to his culture. It's not something he is a bully. He's not someone who's aggressive, but he's someone that will stand up and do what's right.
Stand up and do what's right. He's had several moments throughout his time at Houston, whether it's, you know, the, you know, MLK Day themed kind of stuff the Big 12 is doing. Black History Month in February always overlaps with basketball season. He always pushes that. He always also talks about like his former players getting a fair chance to coach and things like that. He was so happy that Kiwanis got this opportunity in Louisiana and those kinds of options. I want to talk more about Coach himself and the history being made here with his third Final Four in just a second. But first, I do remind folks today's show is brought to you by our buddies over at Supply House. So if you need to get supplies you need for the skilled trades, Supply House is the place to go. Whether you're into plumbing, HVAC, or electrical work, Supply House is the reliable way to order products online. Their easy-to-use website is packed with helpful resources and the latest product info to get you and the job done right. Please, their inventory's got 200 plus thousand different parts, 400 plus top brands. You'll find exactly what you need. Everything there, delivered fast, coast to coast. What I really like is that they have these industry experts, because I am not an expert, but you can talk to them. You always talk to a real person. The trade pros get a little bit of extra edge. Free Trade Master program, also exclusive perks, dedicated phone line, free shipping, discounts. Thousands of skilled professionals are already taking advantage, and now it's your turn. Join the Trade Master program today at supplyhouse.com/TM and start ordering plumbing, HVAC, and electrical supplies with just a few clicks. Plus, use promo code SH5. You get 5% off that first order. That's supplyhouse.com. Park Rangers are joined again by Brent Cahwee of the Pawnee and Yuchi tribe. Nation, I should say. And I want to ask about Sampson and this third Final Four. You mentioned that y'all started Indian sports about 25 years ago. Not to date us or anything like that. 25 years ago, and ironically, there was kind of a national understanding of who Kelvin Sampson was, like shortly thereafter, with that first Final Four at Oklahoma, just a couple years after that, right? And so I want to ask about, like, what was it like getting into this world, covering sports with this very personal and very intentional angle, as he's like becoming a very national figure in the sport?
Yeah, it's I mean, why are you going to date me like that 25 years ago? But
I didn't say how old you were at the time. You could have been 12. I don't know.
yeah, but no, it's great. It ties in. What we do with Indian sports is we cover Native American athletes who compete at the college and professional level, and we travel, to these games, or hopefully when they're in the neighborhood, we travel. We drive. Sometimes we drive overnight to get to these games and cover these athletes or coaches. But going back to your 25 years again thing, at the time there was nothing like that on the internet or in the news about covering Native American athletes. So that's why we started it. And when we started it in 2000, a lot of that was because we had so much going on at the time. Nota Begay, the third, who's a NBC golf analyst, was winning 4 times in a year. Roommate of Tiger Woods, and people didn't know it about. We had Kyrie, I can't remember his last name, but he was a Native American from Oklahoma, and he played for the Detroit Lions. So we had a lot of Native Americans competing in the highest levels. And of course, Coach Sampson was doing great things there at Oklahoma. And I myself, who grew up in Oklahoma, always grew up a Sooner fan, and a Kelvin fan. We thought, like I said, when we started the website, it was a good opportunity to, bring these accomplishments to light, especially for our Indigenous communities, because a lot of our Indigenous communities don't have access to that type of information or knowledge, and we just wanted to get it out there and share. But what I'm getting to, my point is that when we started the website, we didn't know what we were doing. We weren't journalists. We weren't trained by media specialists or had any experience. And we were just figuring out as we go, and to start this show off on our part, with Indian sports. Well, we finally got brave enough to contact the university and say, hey, we want to do a telephone interview with Coach Sampson. And co-founder John Harjo said, you should do it. And I was like, no, you do it. And we're
still give a chicken there.
Yeah, we're going back and forth. He's like, no, I'll record it, and you do the interviews, and so I'll help you with the questions, and so I'll write down the questions and you do it. And so he goes, okay. He goes, well, I can't do it today. He goes, well, do it tomorrow. Of course, this is the world before cell phones. This is the world before there's anything on the internet besides us. Definitely no social media. And so the next day he's like, well, they call me back and the coach can only do it at this time. I was like, oh man, I'm in class that time. I can't do it. So go to class. I'm just antsy all day. And, I get out of class, I call, I said, did you do it? He goes, yeah. And he told me I asked him how to go. He goes, well, I got the information from him, but I started off okay, but then I fell apart in the middle. And he said, I said, well, what happened? He goes, well, Coach Sampson said, John, you've never done an interview before, have you? And he's like, no, sir, I haven't. And he starts telling me what I'm supposed to do. So here we are. We're supposed to be the media people, and Coach Sampson's on the other side of the phone telling us how to be media people.
He never stops coaching. He never.
Yeah, and that was our first, before we had covered sports from stats or picked up stories from SIDs and stuff like that. But this was like our full on first time. Let's call somebody who's famous and do an interview type of thing. And here we are. We don't know what we're doing. Or, John, I'll put it on John. John didn't know what he's doing. And Coach Sampson, halfway through the telephone interview, is encouraging him, telling him the questions he needs to ask for John, and then answer them. so he would have it on tape. So, but yeah, that's our first time when we started the website 25 years ago, and our first interview was with Coach Sampson.
First interview with Coach Sampson. Frankly, again, just on the timing of it at a very big moment in his career. I want to stress, though, and this is really more a curiosity question. As I said at the opening, I'm a teacher and coach. I'm an assistant high school basketball coach in Texas, and frankly, I think that it's a little under discussed. Basketball is kind of a big deal culturally with Native Americans, and I frankly want to ask you. This is admittedly not something I prepped you for off the pod, but do you understand where that comes from? Why that is? We've got NBA players: Beauchamp, Kyrie Irving, Ron Baker was at Wichita State. I think Houston fans remember him from his time there. Like, why is this such a common sport in a community that is a lot of other sports underrepresented?
Right. And that's a good question. And I'll go ahead and add one more to your NBA list. Lindy Waters III out of Oklahoma State is also in the league. And I say that because I'm on his foundation board. No, your answer is pretty simple, because going back to John and I, when we founded Indian Sports, we were both alumni of Haskell Indian Nations University, and located in Lawrence, Kansas, which has kind of been in the news recently nationally. And before it was Indian Nations University, it was called Haskell Institute, and it was founded in 1884 as a boarding school project by the United States government. Well, not getting into all the details about Native American boarding schools, well, the school is only a mile away from the University of Kansas. And so when James Naismith came to Lawrence and brought basketball, he also brought basketball to Haskell Institute. So at the time, in the early 1900s, there were quite a few boarding schools, but the major ones were like Carlisle, that people are familiar with, and the football powerhouse. And then, of course, Haskell Institute, who was a football powerhouse in the 20s. But prior to that, when Carlisle was doing all the great things with Jim Thorpe and Pop Warner, and what people didn't know was Pop Warner didn't like basketball. So the student athletes at Pop Warner School in Carlisle would transfer to Haskell, and then they would play basketball at Haskell. And so the kids that came from the reservations to the boarding schools, like Haskell, like James Smith would also coach at Haskell too. There were instances where James Smith would coach Haskell in one half and coach KU in the other half. So James Smith brought it to Kansas, and then he also brought it to the Institute, which then the students at Haskell Institute took it back to their reservation. And from there, the res ball, as we term it in Native American country, it took a path of a different style of play, like I said, like what we call res ball.
Fascinating. First of all, I love basketball is always the tie that binds in a lot of ways, right? Like, all you need is an even number of people and a hoop, and you're good, right? That's all you really need. Right. You can play with anything, and it's so cool to see how that really goes back to the literal start of basketball, which is exactly. just a crazy thing to think about, right?
And when you read the history of some of the quotes that he puts out, James Naismith in books that they have, it reads, word for word, that said that James Naismith loved the style of the play that the Indian students played at Haskell. He envisioned the game of basketball in that style, which of course was up and down, quick and fast, and shooting long shots and stuff. So the game really, we are just we were there at the birth of the game as well. And that's why it's always been popular on the reservations across the United States.
Well, and it's nice to have good role models, whether that's the handful of NBA players. I mean, there's more than a handful, actually, if I look at the list here. But we've mentioned a few. Kelvin Sampson, the Sampson family being another set of role models. And I want to, in the third and final segment in a second, talk about potential blocks or things keeping a potential future of Kelvin Sampson from happening, and maybe shed some light on something that people might not be following at a national level quite yet, but we might need to. But before we get to that, I do want to remind folks that today is also brought to you by our buddies over at Monarch Money. Monarch Money is a place to make sure that you are, if you ever got to check your bank account, like wonder where'd all my money go or anything like that, dining, online shopping, bunch of Final Four swag, trips to San Antonio, whatever the case may be, it's easy to lose track. That's where Monarch Money comes in. You're Your personal CFO, it gives you full visibility and control of your finances. It's not just a budgeting app, it's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, spending in one place. Stop managing money and start building wealth. I do want to point out, if folks listen to the show a lot, know I'm really about easy apps, and it's a really easy app to use. It's all in one place, very accessible dashboard, very easy to understand and intuitive app as well. Take control of your finances, Monarch Money. Use Locked On College at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. You heard that right. It's monarchmoney.com, code Locked On College for 50% off your first year. Park Ranger Locked On Coogs, trying to get my Brent Cahwee of the Pawnee and Yuchi Nations, and particularly this instance, found one of the co-founders of Indian Sports. So we've teased this Haskell name a lot, and it's a little bit different story. But Kelvin Sampson starts off, the story is well told now. Montana Tech, Washington State, ends up at Oklahoma, great career move, ends up in Indiana for a hot second, has to take some assistant time in the pros before coming back to Houston, rebuilding his career. Well told story. It almost was dramatically different. And frankly, had Haskell been a 4-year college, it probably is different. Talk me through that.
Yeah, so most people don't know, or history that is told at Haskell, around Haskell Indian Nations University, when they were looking for a coach for their basketball program in the early 80s, they had narrowed down to a candidate, and one of those candidates was Coach Sampson, and he applied and he got the interview for the job, and he was looking for a head coaching job at the time, and the story goes that he applied for the job and got the interview, and when it came down to it, it was between Montana Tech and Haskell. At the time, he was looking for a head coaching position for a 4-year program. And so he ended up taking the job for his family. He felt that was going to be a better option long term for him to be competing at a higher level, or coaching at a higher level, because at the time Haskell was still a junior college into the early 80s. So there was a real, the possibility his career could have started there at Haskell, and it might have took a different turn to where he's at now. But it all worked out for him. But that's a story that's told around the Haskell communities.
I think he would have been successful wherever the starting point was. The jump off feels less significant, less significant. The work ethic we talk about, the family culture values we talk about, etc. I think that would have taken him wherever. But it's fascinating that it was that close to starting at this junior college that is in Indian American University. There's Haskell Indian Nations University is the present name, correct? I want to make sure I'm saying that correctly, because Sampson nearly starts his career there. And unfortunately, there's some reporting, as March Madness is a very happy time. We think of coaches jumping and celebrating, what the famous one guy's down and kissing the floor mid-court, people cutting nets down, confetti. This March has not been that for Haskell Indian Nations University necessarily. They've gotten to dance for a long time. They've gotten to dance for a little bit. But there's been some reporting about some other stuff that's unfortunately happened. I know, again, y'all follow all the stories across all these nations, across from coast to coast on this continent. Talk us through this a little bit, because I don't think people have heard the full story here.
Yeah, so Haskell Indian Nation University is what they call a treaty and trust responsibility for the United States. As the American West moved through the United States, Native American tribes were ceding land to the United States. In return, treaties were stricken with the government to say, if you're taking our land, then you have to provide us with education, health, and a place to live. Haskell is one of those treaties and trust responsibilities, so it is 100% funded by the federal government. And then, as we know, a few months ago, the federal government decided to cut back on how many federal employees that they were have. Well, and since Haskell was a federal institution, a lot of their employees were let go. So unfortunately, one of those employees was the women's basketball coach, Adam Strom, who had his team at playing on a 12, 13 game win streak, qualifying for the conference tournament, and then the bottom fell out, and he decided to coach without getting paid to finish out the season because his girls were in, they needed him, number one, as a coach and as a leader, but number two, they were playing really well, and he felt like he couldn't leave them out to dry. So he volunteered to coach the conference tournament without pay, and then travel to the national tournament after they qualified for the national tournament and coach as well. So that made its story across every national and international platform, about the cuts and how that impacted the Haskell institution.
Well, and you mentioned he coached the last part of the season not getting paid. I don't mean to judge what people make and don't make. I would just stress that it looks like in an article I'm reading here, he's making like $84,000. This is not some guy who made $1 million coaching basketball, right? Like he probably needed a few of those checks or could have used finding some other line of work or something. And he chose instead to coach his girls, the university being significant to him, his girls and the hard work being significant to him. This is a little off the cuff and a little bit too connecting to the dots, but we just mentioned how Sampson almost ended up there. Federal cuts have significantly impacted the women's basketball program there. Is it too big of a leap to sit here and be like, hey, some of these, cuts and rollbacks to educational institutions, or at least to the athletic departments, like, are we potentially missing off? There's only one Kelvin Sampson. We mentioned he's the only Indigenous head coach to have a Final Four on his resume. He's got 3 of them. In cutting these back, could we be missing the next one? Am I crazy for jumping there?
Oh, no, it's definitely, you got a lot of great coaches that started off in the junior college ranks and the NAIA ranks, with Haskell being so close to the University of Kansas. I recall incidents where the former Texas Tech coach, who's now at Ole Miss, came and practiced at the gym there, and he requested the head coach there at Haskell to use the gym, and he just casually asked him, why, how do you even know about Haskell? He goes, oh, I played in junior college at Fort Scott, and we came and played Haskell, and so I knew this was going to be open for us, and that was Chris Beard. so yeah, so it's not, you're not far. Well, I agree with you, you're not far off that this could have potentially not allowed Adam to, as his career grows, he could go further for sure.
Well, and who knows what's next for him? Obviously, we're just in the beginning of April, and that I guess their season officially ended in March. And frankly, I would think that that'd be the kind of story that people would want to pick up on and go hire the next person. And I hope that, frankly, the happier side of this is that Kelvin Sampson continuing to be so successful, and the success of his son at Houston right afterwards, right, cross fingers, is, I don't have to cross fingers, I think it'll happen, but the success, I guess that is. I feel like that is all to say, hopefully there are a lot of doors being opened as well. We mentioned there are a lot of NBA players with Indigenous backgrounds, and while I don't know that I want to play for Kyrie Irving necessarily, I do think that there's a natural transition from having a bunch of players leading to having a bunch of coaches, and right. Sampson opening that door, I think, is a big deal. But Brent, we've talked a lot about one coach and kind of hinted at a few athletes. Y'all cover a lot of folks. Where can people find y'all's coverage, et cetera, if they want to dive deeper into these stories?
Oh yeah, definitely. Obviously, I don't know, my finger will reach on your screen there, but under my name there, co-founder of indiansports.com. Go to our website and click on our social media links. We post content every day, 7 days a week, 365 days, about all these great athletes that are in our Indigenous communities nationwide. And some of these names you may have heard of, and you didn't know. This is what we get a lot of times. People say, "Hey, I didn't know that person was Native American." So definitely check us out and enjoy all the content we provide.
That's NDN, letter N, letter D, letter N, sports.com. Also on social media at Indian Sports as well. Thank you, Brent, for coming on and talking through the story with me. I enjoyed talking to Sampson in that well, and it sounds like you've been talking about him as long as anyone. So thanks again.